Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching this on YouTube, on Rumble, or on Ganjing World. Our friend Cass says, Hi, Kevork. I hope you get to see this. The UK has invaded Russia 4 times in post-World War II. Churchill pressed the US to invade their ally Russia. Russia, of course, has never invaded Britain. He also follows up by saying the UK has arms deals with Ukraine and a contract to build warship for Ukraine well before the war started. That's true. And he also says a CSSI US think tank hosted a US military M16 discussion at the outset of the war, in which it was made clear the UK would take a lead role in the war. The farce in the White House is just a farce. I totally agree with you on this. I hope you guys doing well, and I hope those who live in Germany are safe and sound, especially if you're following from Mannheim. For those who don't know, in Mannheim there has been a car attack. I don't know what to call it, to be honest. It's a terror attack, whoever was behind it. And a man driving a car apparently ran into a group of passengers and bystanders, basically killing one person. And this has become a little bit too far here in Germany, and people really do not know if they're going to get killed by a car or by a knife attack, or I don't know. It's a lots of security incidents happening in Germany. It's worrying a little bit, to be honest with you. But I don't want to give so much opinion. Then they say, Kevork is intervening in the internal affairs of Germany. So let me stay quiet on that. But on the bigger picture, we've seen what happened in the White House the other day. I think it was too much boldness and too much rudeness from all sides. I have watched the entire thing. I think it is around 40 minutes or so. And the conference or the discussion started friendly and everything was going well, basically. And, behind closed doors, there could be different types of talks. But I truly think, despite what you think about Trump and his administration, I truly think that it was Zelensky who triggered this clash. He was completely able to save the monologue behind closed doors by asking J.D. Vance, what kind of diplomacy are you talking about, that Russia violated so many ceasefires in the past, so what kind of ceasefire you're going to push forward. So he was questioning not only the intentions of the White House to strike a ceasefire agreement, but also he was questioning the capacity and the capability of the United States to strike a ceasefire deal or mediate a ceasefire deal between Ukraine and Russia. And in this case, this has been seen by the President Trump and J.D. Vance as insulting and humiliating for them. So they really bulldogged against him. They cornered him. It was quite clear from the pictures. I'm sure most of you have seen the pictures how Zelensky was sitting like this because he felt very small in that room, being bashed from all sides. And this has also shown us the very simple fact, and that is Zelensky is not really a leader, is not someone who is capable to say his mind and formulate his ideas without a teleprompter. His ideas were completely separated from each other, and he was trying to push back basically against his host. And he is a guest and who received around $200 billion from the US taxpayer money, regardless if the president was Trump or Biden or whoever. This money is coming from the US taxpayer money. So the US officials really pressed him to say, I'm thankful and this and that. That also felt a little bit humiliating. Sometimes I felt sorry for Zelensky, but to be honest with you, this is a situation which he put himself in 2022 when the Russian offensive started against Ukraine. And in April, March 2022, when he had the chance to sign not only ceasefire agreement, but a peace agreement, which was larger and more comprehensive with Russia. But he took a conscious decision after listening to Boris Johnson and after listening to the Biden administration that he will fight Russia. that he believed the West will support him as long as it takes, that he has NATO on his back. In my opinion, he was a fool to believe in this. And now it's already too late. There is no opportunity or there is no chance for Russia and Ukraine to strike a peace deal, but rather a ceasefire deal. A peace deal would include a security architecture for Ukraine, would include neutralizing or keeping Ukraine in the middle between West and East so that it won't be a NATO ground against Russia and it won't be a Russian ground for aggression against Europe. So this has to be discussed between all parties. And this proves that this war is not between Russia and Ukraine, but rather between Russia and the proxy here is NATO. Today, Donald Trump posted something which is very interesting. He said that tomorrow is going to declare something very important, and he said he's going to be very direct in his words. I don't know what is he basically envisioning or what is he going to say, but the other day I've seen few statements coming from the people who work for the PR team of Donald Trump and being amplified by Elon Musk that they are basically encouraging the withdrawal of the United States from NATO and from the UN. I'm for withdrawing the United States from NATO, definitely 100%. However, I'm not also naive to believe that the European countries will not step up their defense expenditure, so they will try to fill into the vacuum. I don't know if they are capable of doing it. I really suspect that. But withdrawing from the UN, if there is no alternative for withdrawing from the UN, then the United States will act like a complete there is not going to be any chains any longer for the United States. I mean, there hasn't been many chains anyways, and the United States has violated international law so many times and invaded countries without UN authorization, so they already don't respect the UN. But withdrawing from the UN without finding an alternative international body that could at least keep the minimum level of coordination and cooperation and also to sustain or try to establish global peace. And I'm not naive to believe that global peace is completely possible, but there should be minimum level of coordination and cooperation. If this is going to be through BRICS, if BRICS can be an alternative for the UN, let it be. If the UN, if the United States would join BRICS, that would be amazing. But it is obvious that the UN represented the will of the international community after World War II, and the balances of power which was born after World War II. So the balance of power is now shifting in different directions, and there is a consistent work on establishing a multipolar world. And the United States is not fool to not want to benefit from bear the fruits of multipolarity, which is quite obvious that there are multiple, let's say, industrial and economical and technological powerhouses represented in BRICS, and they're cooperating and coexisting peacefully without waging wars against each other. So there is a way, there is a different way, and there is a different path than the UN to establish coexistence between different countries. And this has to be, in my opinion, based on economic cooperation and mutual growth. And this is, by the way, possible, guys. Whoever is telling you that this type of coexistence between superpowers is difficult or impossible, this person is not really telling you the truth, because the logical thing to expect after increasing trade relationship and business relationship and economic integration between these different powers is that these all powers would have an invested interest in keeping the other economy functional without going into wars. And this means that the zero-sum game that has prevailed after World War II should come to an end. Probably this is changing in the United States, maybe. I'm not 100% convinced of it, but there is a sense in the US that the unipolarity is over. And in this case, I'm going to host Brian Berletic on the 7th of March. So on Friday, this Friday, but this is going to be early. So I'm going to start the streaming at 12 p.m. Central European time. It's going to be 6 a.m. Eastern American time because Brian lives, I believe, in Malaysia or in Bangkok. And I think that the time difference is too big. I cannot really have him at 12 or 1 after midnight and do a live streaming. So we have to do it a little bit earlier. If you're coming from the United States, I apologize for you. But when you wake up, I'm sure that you will have a ready material and a brilliant conversation about the US empire, about unipolarity, multipolarity, BRICS, USAID, Trump administration, relationship between Russia and the US, relation between the US and China, and what is the new role of Europe from all this. And speaking of Europe, so I have published an article today on Substack about this exact case, which I'm going to address to you, and Europe's, I don't want to really generalize, like let's say a few European leaders, officials who have taken a really hawkish position on the Ukraine war. So the fallout from President Trump's failed meeting with Ukrainian President Zelensky, of course, sent shockwaves through the geopolitical landscape in the world. In the aftermath of the drama, Zelensky swiftly pivoted to Europe. Meeting with European leaders to secure the military assistance he believes is necessary if Ukraine chooses the path of war over peace. But as European leaders rally behind Ukraine, their path or their rhetoric has taken a dangerously escalatory tone, one that raises serious questions about their commitment to diplomacy and their willingness to risk a broader conflict. For example, take Keir Starmer, who is very unpopular among the Brits. Keir Starmer, the UK Labour leader, has declared that Britain is ready to put, quote, boots on the ground and planes in the air to defend a peace deal in Ukraine. This isn't just like saber rattling. It's a stark escalation, in my opinion, in rhetoric, suggesting a willingness to directly involve British forces in the conflict. Meanwhile, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has called for, quote, a massive surge in European defense to counter, quote, the Russian threat. And most famously, Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas has gone even further, advocating not just for confronting Russia, but also for defeating China. It's really hard not to wonder, have these globalist leaders lost their minds? The language being used is quite alarming. Instead of prioritizing diplomacy and de-escalation, European leaders seem to be doubling down on militarization and confrontation. Von der Leyen's calls for defense surge and Kallas's hawkish stance on China suggests a dangerous shift toward a new Cold War mentality, one that pits Europe against not just Russia, but also China, two nuclear armed powers with the capacity to challenge the collective West. But guys, let's be clear. This isn't just about Ukraine. It's about the broader agenda of globalist leaders who seem more interested in projecting power and maintaining hegemony than in pursuing peace. By framing the conflict in Ukraine as an existential struggle against Russia and, by extension, China, they are justifying unprecedented levels of military spending and interventionism. The question is, who benefits from this? Certainly not the people of Ukraine, who have already endured years of war and suffering, and certainly not the citizens of Europe and the residents of Europe, basically. The real beneficiaries are the defense contractors, the arm dealers, and the political elites who thrive on perpetual conflict. What's even more troubling is the lack of public debate about these decisions. European leaders are making sweeping commitments to war and militarization without even consulting their citizens or considering the long-term consequences. They are choosing confrontation over dialogue, escalation over diplomacy, and war over peace. Is this really the path we want to go down? This is the question that I would like to ask every European citizen here. Do we really believe that more weapons, more troops, and more confrontation will bring stability to Ukraine or security to Europe? Or are we sleepwalking into a conflict that could have catastrophic consequences for the entire world? The time has come to ask these politicians why they are so eager to choose war over diplomacy and why they are willing to risk so much for a conflict that could easily spiral out of control. Because if they continue down this path, the consequences will be felt far beyond Ukraine and far beyond Europe. This was my opinion about this case. But I was checking some, reactions about this meeting between Zelensky and Trump, and I came across an article, by the way, in the National Review. Imagine even the National Review are bashing basically Zelensky, and they even call, and the title of the article is hilarious. They say, "Is Zelensky an idiot?" And this article is published by Rich Lorre. And Rich says, as someone who wishes Ukraine well, I was shocked at how poorly Zelensky handled yesterday. It was complete malpractice. It was wrong of Trump and Vance to berate him and the way they did. But if you are vulnerable, a vulnerable foreign leader in a situation where the president of your leading patron might berate you in public, the priority is not to get berated. If Zelensky had been playing by these rules, the first thing he should have done was wear a business suit. It would have been a notable sign of respect and would have removed a point of friction with Trump. If he and his team are halfway competent, they would take account of the fact that the president's supporters absolutely hate his fatigues. It also made Zelensky seem even smaller when things went south, that he wasn't dressed appropriately. Then there was the substance of the Oval Office meeting. All Zelensky needed to do was say, one, the war never would have happened if Trump had been president. Two, I appreciate his efforts for peace. And three, Ukrainians too want peace, but also what's best for our country. And four, and I look forward to our discussion. Simply and basic. You can rue for good reason the way that Trump uses this conflict and how he expects to get fluffed up by people he meets and talk with, but it's a reality. All sorts of foreign actors have taken this on board and reacted accordingly to protect their interest, except the guy who has the most to lose by stupidly refusing to play by the simple, easy to understand rules. Zelensky dressed in his usual fashion and scored some nice debating points in the Oval Office yesterday. What did it get him or his country? Basically, he lost. He didn't get anything. He lost a lot. I think the Russian rapprochement with the United States will definitely continue in the next days. However, this issue of Ukraine will stay on the table for, it seems, longer time, because the European leaders, when they met after this meeting, Zelensky flew to Europe and he met with 6 or 7 European leaders, and every and single one of them vote to support Ukraine as long as it takes. We will give them the weapons they need to defend themselves. They were fighting for freedom. And it seems that the PR machine of Ukraine has revived again. Also here in Germany, they are organizing protests and demonstrations for peace and freedom. I don't know if there is any German who still believes that this war in Ukraine is about freedom. Maybe someone who is completely brainwashed, and there are many. And this is not something exclusive to Germany. Myself in Syria, we have many of them, and I find that it has become too obvious for the people to not see through the conflict in Ukraine, which it has been and always been a proxy war between regional powers and international powers. This was a struggle over the Black Sea, struggle over the earth minerals, struggle over the position of Ukraine, and struggle between East and West. There were so many components and factors in it, including investments and the bankers who bought all this massive land in Ukraine for reconstruction. And now Donald Trump wants to, suck Ukraine dry. But if it's not the United States, it's going to be someone else. So in this case, for the United States, for those who want to know my opinion honestly, I am in favor of the Trump administration approach to solve this conflict, but I'm not naive to believe or think that Trump wants the best for Ukraine or the Ukrainian people. What Trump thinks, two things. The first thing is this war in Ukraine, it should never have been gone out of control like this. Like it's not out of control like there is a NATO and Russia conflict, but it should the hot war shouldn't have started. Trump didn't want for this war to happen for the basic simple reason. In the eyes of the United States, or let's say in the conservative Republican wing of the establishment, they don't see Russia as an existential threat against Europe. And they don't think and they don't believe that the Russian army has the will or the capability to wage a ground offensive invasion for the rest of Europe and occupy Europe like the European leaders are nowadays fear mongering. And technically and realistically speaking, this is correct. Russia doesn't have the will or the capacity to invade Europe or to occupy Europe in this regard. And I argued in the past live streaming, Russia doesn't even have the interest in occupying Western Ukraine. It's too hostile for them even to occupy, because occupation is not the end of the story. It's keeping this territory safe and stable is the main issue. So if you occupy an area, let's say Russia has the military capacity to wage a conventional war, a ground offensive, and occupy all of Ukraine, and send soldiers to stabilize the region in a hostile environment, their soldiers will get killed daily. So it's not even sustainable for them to occupy Western Ukraine, let alone the rest of Europe, like they are fear-mongering us. So in the eyes of the Trump administration, in this case, since this war happened, this brought China and Russia closer together. And in the eyes of Trump and his team, the biggest threat for the unipolarity or the hegemony of the United States is China. It's not Russia. And it is true. It is true that China is the biggest challenge for the US and not Russia. But imagine now bringing two superpowers together in a strategic alliance like China and Russia. This was something that the United States didn't want to materialize between Russia and Germany. That's why they blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. But this has blew up in the face of the democratic wing of the establishment when they went into provocations against Russia, because they wanted to stop and slice Europe, and they wanted to stop this economic integration between Germany and Russia. But now China, it seems they have made their calculations and they put scenarios in case this war happens and what alternative markets do they have, and they have proceeded with a strategic partnership with China. And this strengthens both Russia and China in favor of Beijing and in favor of Moscow, unlike in Washington. So the United States under Trump, they want to slow down at least this strategic partnership. Otherwise, it is going to reflect negatively on the hegemonic status of the United States around the world. So if China and Russia start cooperating in Far East Asia, start cooperating in the Indian Ocean, start cooperating in the Gulf countries, start cooperating in the Middle East, this is going to be very difficult for the United States to compete with two powers if they invest jointly in diplomatically and economically in different regions around the world. So that is the first reason why Trump wants to end this war. Not for the sake of the Ukrainians, not for the sake of the Russians, and not because he likes Putin, that all these pundits are claiming. No. It is because he wants to slow down this partnership between China and Russia. And the second reason is the earth minerals. In the eyes of Trump, and in the eyes of actually any sane military observer, if you put the map and if you see if you put the equations and the calculations and the military strength, economic strength, manpower, firepower, and everything indicate that Russia is winning this war. So as much as Russia occupies land in Ukraine, as much as it occupies earth minerals, and as much as Russia occupies territories that have earth minerals, as much as China benefits from these earth minerals. So do you see how important is this for the United States? They don't care about Ukraine, Zelensky, people, 600,000, 1 million people. If this war went wrong for Russia, yes, this war started by the Biden administration, but let's take into account the following scenario, just hypothetically. If the Ukrainians were successful in their counteroffensive and somehow they kick out the Russian forces from Ukraine, Trump would not have taken this position now on Russia-Ukraine war. Y- Trump would have taken the position of supporting Ukraine as long as it takes because Ukraine is the winning side. But Trump is a businessman. Trump sees that it is Russia who is winning this war, and it is Russia who is occupying all these earth minerals, and it is China who will benefit from this. Imagine how much earth minerals they have with trillions of dollars worth of earth minerals that China will use them in their technological sector, in their EV cars, in their arm industries, in their satellites, so many things that the United States is competing with China, and China will have the upper hand. So the stakes are very high for the United States. That's why they wanted to impose this earth mineral deal with Zelensky, but Zelensky refused it, and he was kicked out of the White House. This would be my simple explanation about this situation. So, we have Secretary Marco Rubio basically commenting on why the United States is upset with Zelensky's regime, basically. Let's take a look what he has to say.
When President Trump posts that President Zelensky is a dictator without elections, what are you thinking?
I think President Trump is very upset at President Zelensky, and in some cases, and rightfully so. Look, number one, Joe Biden had frustrations with Zelensky. People shouldn't forget it. There are newspaper articles out there about how he cursed at him in a phone call because Zelensky, instead of saying thank you for all your help, is immediately out there messaging what we're not doing or what he's not getting. I think the second thing is, frankly, I was personally very upset because we had a conversation with President Zelensky, the vice president and I, three of us. And we discussed this issue about the mineral rights. And we explained to them, look, we want to be in a joint venture with you, not because we're trying to steal from your country, but because we think that's actually a security guarantee. If we're your partner in an important economic endeavor, we get to get paid back some of the money the taxpayers have given, close to $200 billion. And it also, now we have a vested interest in the security of Ukraine. And he said, sure, we want to do this deal. It makes all the sense in the world. The only thing is I need to run it through my legislative process. They have to approve it. I read 2 days later that Zelensky's out there saying, I rejected the deal. I told him, no way, that we're not doing that. Well, that's not what happened in that meeting. So you start to get upset by somebody. We're trying to help these guys. One of the points the president made in his messaging is not that we don't care about Ukraine, but Ukraine is on another continent. You know, it doesn't directly impact the daily lives of Americans. We care about it because it has implications for our allies and ultimately for the world. There should be some level of gratitude here about this. And when you don't see it and you see him out there accusing the president of living in a world of disinformation, that's very counterproductive. And I don't need to explain to you or anybody else, President Trump's not the kind of person that's going to sit there and take that. He's very transparent. He's going to tell you exactly how he feels. And he sent a message that he's not going to get gamed here. He's willing to work on peace because he cares about Ukraine. And he hopes Zelensky will be a partner in that, and not someone who's out there putting this sort of counter messaging to try to, hustle us in that regard. That's not going to be productive here.
So guys, the United States just cares about Ukraine, and they are trying to help the Ukrainians by taking over their rare earth minerals just for security guarantees for Ukraine. So the main difference between the approach of Ukraine by Zelensky and the Trump administration is about the security guarantees. Trump says once the United States invests in these earth minerals and they have an access to the earth minerals, they will send their factories, investors, and workers, labor, etc. And this is enough security guarantees that Russia would not invade the parts where the Americans are located, and they are investing in these areas, right? But Zelensky wants a NATO type of security agreement. Like joining NATO is like now out of a question. Ukraine will not join NATO, says the United States. However, he wants something similar with either Europe or with the United States, which means that he's asking for Washington and Brussels, in case of an aggression against Ukraine or the continuation of the war, that these countries would be obliged to come and fight alongside Ukraine, which is the same, the Article 5 of the NATO article, right? Charter, excuse me. So in this case, the United States doesn't want to commit itself with Ukraine for a simple reason, because they don't want to have a military conflict with nuclear Russia. It's an insanity to think that otherwise. Secondly, the United States doesn't have an invested interest in fighting for Ukraine. It's as Marco Rubio says, we're far away. There is an ocean between us. It doesn't affect our daily citizen. So we're only focusing on the business side. We want to benefit from the whatever Ukraine can offer, but we don't want to commit ourselves. So United States basically wants to take everything, but not to offer the security guarantees, which is the military commitment. But on the other hand, we have the Europeans are committing themselves for this. We don't know if they're going to achieve this, but we have Keir Starmer, who is very unpopular, by the way, in the UK. He says, Keir Starmer, the UK is ready to put boots on the ground and planes in the air to defend peace deal in Ukraine. Take a look.
First, we will keep the military aid flowing and keep increasing the economic pressure on Russia to strengthen Ukraine now. Second, we agreed that any lasting peace must ensure Ukraine's sovereignty and security, and Ukraine must be at the table. Third, in the event of a peace deal, we will keep boosting Ukraine's own defensive capabilities to deter any future invasion. Fourth, we will go further to develop a coalition of the willing to defend a deal in Ukraine and to guarantee the peace. Not every nation will feel able to contribute, but that can't mean that we sit back. Instead, those willing will intensify planning now with real urgency. The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. Together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting. But to support peace in our continent and to succeed, this effort must have strong US backing. We're working with the US on this point after my meeting with President Trump last week. And let me be clear, we agree with the President on the urgent need for a durable peace. Now, we need to deliver together. Finally, we agreed that leaders will meet again very soon to keep the pace behind these actions and to keep working towards this shared plan. We are at a crossroads in history today. This is not a moment for more talk. It's time to act, time to step up and lead, and to unite around a new plan for a just and enduring peace. Thank you.
Guys, with simple research, we will find out that the number of UK soldiers are approximately 75,000 soldiers. And the Russian armed forces are 1.5 million soldiers. And the UK Prime Minister wants to contribute the most for this. This is a suicidal mission. And I think the people have the right to have a say over this. The people have to agree with such policy. I don't think there is anyone who voted for this. I don't think anyone who wants to send his kids to frontline in Ukraine. And if Keir Starmer is really determined, I think if he has any sons, he has to start by sending his sons and also paying the taxes for it, paying for the price. Because who is going to pay for this? This is going to be from a military bond that they are going to soon introduce to the people, which is they're talking about the Europe's defense budget and increase in the defense industry, etc. So the people will contribute in building this. The people will pay them from their taxes. The people will build them from the inflation, and this is going to impact directly their livelihood and social welfare. And we're already feeling this in Europe, right? And we're already feeling from the bills, and we're already feeling from the infrastructure in the country. We're already feeling from the dirt everywhere in the public transport. We're feeling from the homelessness everywhere. We are feeling from the lack of security in the streets, because there is not enough expenditure or spending over the basic services of the people, which is security, which is cleaning. Like, how is it possible to go to any like a train station and you feel so insecure because there are so many people standing outside the, let's say, the train stations, basically jobless people, and talking very loud, smoking I don't know, hash or marijuana, and then they're harassing people, they're talking loud, and they're being aggressive, and it's everywhere. You don't really feel safe. Everywhere there are people sitting on the ground, or homeless people everywhere, drunk people everywhere, people sleeping in the public transport because they're black out and from drugs and from alcohol. It feels so it feels so dystopian anyways. And I wonder, because like where I live and where I go by the train station, I truly wonder if these train stations are being cleaned, because myself, I think they're probably cleaning it 1 or 2 times per year. And I think that people, especially taxpayer people, have legitimate concerns, like sending their children to school in a safe environment. And I'm not like trying to exaggerate things. It's not like things are out of control, but they are visibly, like objectively visible. And you can see the change every day. It's not like every few months there is a little bit of change. No, on a daily basis, you see the change. And Keir Starmer, he knows that he cannot put enough boots on the ground to guarantee this peace or any type of agreement in Ukraine. And he was mocked by Donald Trump, if you remember last week when he was in the White House Oval again, and he was talking about Russia, and this is how Donald Trump embarrassed him.
In his remarks at the Munich Security Conference, Vice President Vance condemned free speech violations in the UK, particularly. Could you respond? What is your message?
I have an idea. We have the man right here. Come on. Let's go, JD. We're putting you on stage.
Great. Yeah, look, I said what I said, which is that we do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies. But we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension, American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
We've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history there.
In his remarks at the Munich.
I thought this is the video where he was mocked about it, but I will show you that video again. But I will say this is a complete lie anyways. Keir Starmer is not only lying, he you know how many times the UK police not only knocked the doors of the people, but they went inside their homes, they have confiscated their electronics, they have charged them with crimes for speech online, for posts on X, for podcasts, for words you have said online. And they have abused the Terrorism Act. They have imprisoned Julian Assange for how many years? And they have invaded the houses and the apartments of journalists and activists during the genocide in Gaza. Of course, Richard Mitchell is one of them, but there are many of them were stopped. This week also Professor Miller was stopped because he returned from Lebanon after the funeral. So I think this is something that is like even by the way, the Trump administration cannot really point out, because they don't want the issue of basically the issue of Palestine to be on the agenda, because they're also agreeing basically with the UK and others for the persecution of people who speak for the Palestinians. But this was a video that I wanted to show you of Keir Starmer, who was mocked by Donald Trump. I couldn't find it on the internet at the current moment, but he basically was talking about challenging Russia and how brave the cooperation between, how good the cooperation between the United States and the UK is in order to challenge the Russian threat, etc. And then Trump asks him, like, can you guys in the UK, like, challenge or take on the Russians alone? And he starts laughing. He says, well, and he knows, like, all the European countries, they cannot singularly or individually challenge Russia. I mean, the UK cannot do it, but they have big mouths because under NATO, they are so sure that Trump will intervene on their side. But now let's see what is going to happen with NATO if Trump is really going to withdraw from NATO. Like, do you really think that is possible, guys? Please let me know in the comments below. So I just want to encourage people to not engage with trolls. People who have IQ of a 3-year-old toddlers who do not know how to discuss politics or be respectful, just ignore them. I'm not going to focus on the chat and try to, delete chats. I don't even delete chats, or even if some people are asking. I don't delete chats, guys, but YouTube has some sort of AI detectors. They filter some words and they don't show them. So anyways, now I'm going to show you the most hilarious video of this week. And this is by none other than Kaja Kallas, the genius of the EU and the chief diplomat of the EU, who is not the smartest among her peers and colleagues, but the problem with her is that she thinks she's smart. That's the real issue. It's not like she's her self-confidence is not high. No, she acts so arrogantly and bluntly, and she thinks that she's saying smart words. But everyone other than her, probably she created a bubble around her, and she's just meeting with people that she interacts usually, and everybody is giving her the pushy treatment. But I believe anyone who, even if somebody doesn't know Kaja Kallas and you show some of these videos, you say, this is not too smart. So this is her talking about not only Russia, but China. And I'm going to divide this video into 2 parts. And let's first discuss what she has to say.
China. Well, we have, of course, the de-risking policy. So really not to make the same mistakes that we have done with Russia. But now seeing America really bonding with Russia, then that, of course, raises a lot of questions regarding China as well. And of course, China is very friendly with us now. I mean,
look. Listen when she says China is very friendly to us, and then the smirk and smile.
Friendly with us now. I mean, and of course, China is very friendly with us now. I mean,
you see this smile? This is an indication that she doesn't believe that China is genuinely friendly with the European Union or with Europe. She really thinks that China has ill intentions, and China is dealing friendly with Europe because they have different agenda under the table, and they're trying to, dominate over Europe or subjugate them. And this is, in my opinion, a projection. This is a projection from them, these globalist leaders, because this is what they think, and this is what they try to do with other countries. They shake your hands and then they kill you, right? They have done it with so many leaders. And they pretend to be friends with other countries, and then they impoverish the people. They send them under the poverty lines by weaponizing the sanctions against them, against their economy, against the central bank. They freeze their assets. They ban them from importing and exporting. They cut them from the SWIFT. They cut them from the transactions and bank networks, etc., etc., etc. So they always do that. And now they think that China is weaponizing the same policy that they usually pursue against them. That's why when she says China is now friendly with us, but like she means like we don't believe that China is friendly to us. And this is something that it bothers me, and it is it's too obvious. what is happening. And it's too obvious, the differences of approaches, and it's too obvious now that the people, not only the people, but officials, senior officials around the world do not really take now people like Kallas seriously, because they know that they have ill intentions, they know that they are not willing for cooperation, and it's difficult to deal with such personalities. If you have a Chinese leader who is like, a word is a word, or in Russia or in Brazil or in elsewhere in other countries, which there is the gentleman agreement, like if I give you my word, it is respected, right? But something, this is, even if it's written, it's in ink on paper and you have agreements and signatures, it's difficult for this type of politicians to keep their words. This is really sad. Let's continue.
We need to have the discussions on our China policy. So far, it has been so that de-risking, really not to put all the eggs in one basket, in de-risking in the areas where the risks are higher, cooperating in other areas with China. So. And of course, here, what America does plays a big role. And by the way, one of the questions nobody is able to answer here about China.
Nobody is able to answer here. She's the genius and everybody is stupid in front of her, and she's sitting in the Hudson Institute, and nobody is able to answer this question.
If, I hear the statements by some American officials saying that, you can't possibly beat Russia. I mean, Russia is so much bigger and, you need to give in to Russia because it's not beatable, which is not true, by the way. But then you're trying to signal to your Asian counterparts that if China is attacking them, then you are there. But China is so much bigger economy than Russia is, with so much bigger military than Russia is. So if you're saying that you're not able to beat, that we collectively are not able to really pressure Russia so much that it would have an effect, because then how do you say that you're able to take on China risk? If somebody is able to answer me this question, I would be very happy.
Imagine being being so unsmart to ask such a question, like in Hudson Institute, and first starting your conversation by telling nobody has answered this question. But maybe I can answer this question to you, Kallas. Maybe your advisors are not so smart as well, although I doubt that, and I think that you can hire very good advisors about this. The strength and the might and the power of Russia doesn't really come only from the size of Russia, because if you're a big size and you cannot really protect your land, then you're a weak country. But the Russian power, there are different factors in Russia you have to take into consideration. First of all, the United States doesn't see that Russia has a conventional army which could pose a threat against against Eastern Europe and Western Europe, and we have discussed this at the beginning of this stream. But the most important thing that the United States sees in this is the Russian nuclear capabilities, and the Russian nuclear capabilities are a threat, not only against Europe but against the United States. But there is a catch. The catch here is that Russia may use nuclear weapons, or will use, or would use nuclear weapons if and or when their existential threat comes under, like there's an existential threat against them. Only then the nuclear option would be on the table. So provoking Russia in Ukraine through the statements like Keir Starmer that will send boots on the ground, will send fighter jets, etc., or the stupid statements from Kaja Kallas and her likes in the European Union, those are the ones that could provoke a nuclear war. And this is what Donald Trump told the other day to Zelensky. He said, you're playing with, you don't have cars, you're gambling with World War III, etc. And he's right. This war is only pushing us closer and closer to such scenario. Therefore, de-risk or de-escalation in this case with Russia presents two things. One, it removes the nuclear option from the table, and two, it brings back peace and economic stability in Western Europe because Russia is not going to invade these countries anyways. So this is the strategy, and as I mentioned at the beginning, because they want to slow down the partnership with China, between Russia and China. Now, China is, of course, a bigger threat, as you mentioned. But if all these European countries together cannot really defeat Russia in Ukraine, then how is she going to defeat China? Because she says China has a bigger economy and bigger army. So how are they planning on taking on China? This is a question that she has to answer, which they will never be able to answer these questions because they don't even know the answer. And I'm really suspicious. Like, do they really understand these things, or do they understand the meaning of the words they use? Defeating Russia or defeating China? I really doubt it. I really doubt it. Now, this is the question that comes to my mind every time. Why every globalist politician is talking about defeating their economic or political rivals? Like, why there is no room for cooperation and mutual growth? The answer is in three factors. The first factor is imperialism. They are stuck in an imperialist mindset. And this leads us to the second one, which is domination doctrine. It all comes from imperialism, domination doctrine, and zero-sum game. This is the worldview in their eyes. They have been used. This mentality is an accumulation of 400 years of Western hegemony over the world. Therefore, they have stuck in this mindset. They need time to get out of this. But because the political elite in most of the Western countries are being groomed to become like Kallas, right? If you're not from the type of Kallas, you're not going to be a senior politician in the EU or in other European countries. So this has become like a prerequisite before somebody ascends in the political hierarchy. So this is like they have incentivized in like there is an incentivizing the politicians and people in the West to become like Kaja Kallas. Otherwise, it's difficult. So there is like an invested interest for someone to be like Kaja Kallas. Not only not so smart, but also hawkish. And this is to the extent that at the beginning of this video, I explained this murky, yellowish smile and laughter from Kaja Kallas because she's projecting her own mindset on China. This is the difference. I just want to mention last thing about China, which I mentioned in the past live streamings, and that is Europe needs China. China doesn't need Europe. China is self-sufficient in everything, and they can build everything. And they're getting their oil and gas from China, from Russia, and from Iran. And they're building, and they are investing, and they are building all over the world, in Latin America, in Chile, in Brazil, in Argentina, in South Africa, in India, even in India. Imagine. They are investing everywhere. But most notably and most importantly for Europe is Africa. The African population is growing very fast, and the European population are drowning very fast. Therefore, if if the European Union is in this backward imperialist mindset, wants to defeat China, this eventually means the failure of the Chinese model and experience in Africa. So in 50 years, when Africa becomes like 3-4 times more than the European continent, and they don't have enough infrastructure, hospitals, water dams, energy resources, earth minerals, ports, universities, schools, businesses, job opportunities, etc. Where do you think all these Africans would go if they don't have enough money to feed your child? They're going to come to Europe. So basically, China is doing a great service to Europe, but the European chief diplomat, she's like, I sometimes, like, I dance around the words that I'm using because I don't want to humiliate anyone and then get locked up, because these people are very sensitive of words. They don't believe in freedom of speech, freedom of blah, blah, blah. All these things are completely irrelevant for them. I want to lastly show you one last thing, by the way. For those who are watching, just want to say a few things. I'm streaming on YouTube, on Rumble, and on Gun Jing Word. If you're watching this stream and you want to support this work, you can just hit the thumbs up, because on all these platforms, you can hit the thumbs up and leave a comment. That would be very appreciative. On Gun Jing Word, this is the website that I am streaming as well, which I was promised to be treated fairly, unlike on YouTube, which is suppressing most of my content. The other day when I did this long video about the USAID investments in Syria and the billions of dollars that they funneled into areas controlled by Al-Qaeda, YouTube demonetized that video, by the way, just for you to know. So if you're looking for supporting this channel, you can also become a patron. Patreon.com/Syriana Analysis, or there are different other means in the description below. Just if you can and if you want to support independent journalism like I'm doing. And tomorrow I'm going to have George Samueli on this show, and we're going to discuss again the European hawkish position on Russia. So stay tuned for that and subscribe. 50% of you, by the way, guys, are not subscribers on Syriana Analysis. Just a quick reminder. So I'm going to show you finally a video by Professor John Mearsheimer. John Mearsheimer says the Europeans dance to our tune. We have all these fictions that we tell people about joint decision-making. The US runs NATO and the Europeans do what we tell them. Europe thinks it has a room for maneuver in Ukraine. It doesn't, because they are vassals.
Why didn't the Europeans get their way? The Europeans didn't get the way because the Europeans danced to our tune. We run NATO. This is a matter of power. We have all these fictions that we tell people about joint decision-making. The United States runs NATO, and the Europeans do what we tell them. You can talk to the Russians about this. You want to know why Putin and Lavrov send a letter to Washington on December 17th and say, that's the response we care about? They don't care about the response from Jens Stoltenberg. How many divisions does Jens Stoltenberg have, right? It's the United States of America that really matters. Pardon? No, it's not, but he was talking about Merkel and Sarkozy. And Bush got what he wanted. My question is, why didn't Merkel stand up to him? Merkel understood. Sarkozy understood. It was the Americans who were pursuing a remarkably foolish policy. If you just think about what Merkel said, Germany is going to suffer enormously from this catastrophe in Ukraine. It is going to have really negative effects. And I say to myself, apropos your comments, why didn't she throw down the gauntlet and say, under no circumstances are we allowing Ukraine to come into NATO? That's exactly what she should have done. But the Germans hardly ever do that. They always dance to our tunes.
So one of our commentators, Irene, is asking which video was suppressed and demonetized by YouTube. And I will show you my YouTube channel. First of all, if you click on the channel, you have to go to live to see the live streamings. And this is a live streaming, by the way, is scheduled with Brian Berletic. As you can see, it's on the 7th of March at noontime. And then this is the video which I'm talking about, USAID scandal, 15 billion into the Syrian war. This video stayed and remained demonetized by YouTube for, I don't know what's the reason for it. But anyways, I thank every single one of you guys for tuning into today's live streaming, and we will see you tomorrow for sure at 5 p.m. Central European time, 11 a.m. Eastern American time. Before leaving this stream, I encourage you to hit the like button, thumbs up, leave a comment, guys. That's a great support. And I will see you tomorrow with George Samueli. If you're looking forward to it, subscribe to Syriana Analysis, and we'll see you tomorrow. Salam.